Between 1206 and 1368, the Mongol Empire killed an estimated 40 million people. That was roughly 10% of the entire world population at the time. And the way they did it? The methods they used to torture, punish, and execute their enemies were so twisted, so inventive, that even other brutal empires looked at the Mongols and said, "That's too far." These are the 20 most horrific Mongol torture methods, ranked from brutal to absolutely unthinkable. Let's start with number 20, the Kang. We start with something that looks almost harmless compared to what comes later. The Kang was a heavy wooden board, kind of like a portable stockade, locked around a prisoner's neck. It weighed anywhere from 30 to 50 pounds, and the person wearing it could not feed themselves, could not lie down properly, and could not escape the sun or the rain. Prisoners wore these for weeks, sometimes months. Their necks would develop open sores from the weight. Infection sets in fast. Sleep became almost impossible because there was no comfortable way to rest your head. Some prisoners starved to death because they could not lift food to their own mouths without help. And this was considered a light punishment by Mongol standards. Prisoners who survived the Kang were often left with permanent neck damage, unable to hold their heads upright ever again. The Mongols used it mainly for petty criminals and minor offenders. That should tell you everything about what comes next, because if this is what they did for small crimes, imagine what they saved for the big ones. Here comes number 19, public dragging. When the Mongols captured enemy soldiers they considered dishonorable, they tied them to the backs of horses and dragged them through the streets at full speed. This was not a quick death. The rough ground tore through clothing, then skin, then muscle. And this was always a public event. Entire cities were forced to watch as the prisoners were pulled across rough terrain, over rocks, through dirt, until their bodies were torn apart beyond recognition. Persian chroniclers recorded that after the Mongols lost a battle near Isfahan, the enemy tied Mongol prisoners behind horses and dragged them through the city streets as entertainment for the locals. The Mongols never forgot that insult. They never forgot anything. They came back years later and wiped Isfahan off the map, killing every living person they found inside. Let's move to number 18, forced labor until death. The Mongols sorted conquered populations into categories after taking a city: skilled workers, young men for the army, and everyone else. That everyone else group often ended up in forced labor camps. They carried siege equipment, dug trenches, hauled stones, and served as human shields during attacks on the next city. The work was relentless. No rest, barely any food, and the moment someone collapsed, they were left to die where they fell. Thousands of prisoners died this way during the Khwarezmian campaign alone, working literally to the bone. Next one is number 17, the Skull Tower. After conquering a city that had resisted, the Mongols sent a very clear message to the next city in their path. They collected the severed heads of the dead, stacked them into massive pyramids outside the city walls, and left them there to rot. These skull towers could contain thousands of heads, sometimes tens of thousands. When Mongol forces destroyed the city of Nishapur in 1221, they reportedly separated the heads of men, women, and children into 3 different piles. Even the dogs and cats in the city were killed. Nothing was spared. The purpose was pure psychological warfare. Mongol scouts would ride ahead to the next city and describe in vivid detail what they had seen. The next city down the road would see these towers from miles away and surrender immediately. And it worked. Countless cities opened their gates without a fight after hearing about what happened to the ones that resisted. Surrender meant survival. Resistance meant becoming part of the next skull pyramid. Let's move to number 16, immurement. This one is exactly what it sounds like. The Mongols would wall a person up inside a small space, brick by brick, and leave them there. No food, no water, no light. Just darkness and a slow, agonizing wait for death. Immurement was still practiced in Mongolia as late as the early 1900s. The victim could survive for days depending on the size of the space and whether any air could get through. Some accounts describe victims scratching at the walls until their fingernails were gone. It was a punishment reserved for serious crimes, especially treason. Here comes number 15, the bamboo shoot. The Mongols adopted this technique from their campaigns in China and Southeast Asia. A prisoner was stripped and tied down over a patch of freshly cut bamboo shoots. Bamboo grows fast, sometimes up to 3 feet in a single day. Over the course of hours, the shoots would slowly push upward through the prisoner's body. It was one of the slowest, most agonizing forms of execution imaginable. The victim remained conscious for much of the process because the bamboo avoided major arteries at first, piercing through soft tissue with terrible precision. Let's move to number 14, boiling in cauldrons. Before Genghis Khan united the Mongol tribes, one of his rivals, a warlord named Jamuka, was famous for a very specific form of cruelty. After winning battles, Jamuka had captured enemy generals thrown into giant cauldrons of boiling water and cooked alive. Historical records mention 70 cauldrons being used after one battle alone. Some scholars debate whether that number is exact or just meant to represent a huge amount. But either way, the scale of it was staggering. Picture 70 large iron pots, each with a human being inside, set over open flames. The screams alone would have carried for miles. When people heard about what Jamuka did to his prisoners, many of them actually switched their loyalty to Genghis Khan, figuring he was the lesser evil. And that says something about how terrifying boiling execution was, because Genghis Khan was far from a gentle man himself. Next one is number 13, starvation siege. The Mongols perfected the art of starving entire cities into submission. They would surround a city, cut off every supply route, and wait. During the siege of Zhongdu, the capital of the Jin dynasty, the starvation inside the walls became so extreme that residents resorted to eating the dead. The Mongols could have attacked at any time, but they chose to wait. Weeks turned into months. The psychological damage was just as devastating as the physical hunger. By the time the city finally fell, the people inside were barely alive. And the Mongols made sure every neighboring city heard exactly what had happened. Let's move to number 12, trampling by horses. The Mongols had a strict religious rule. They believed that spilling royal or noble blood would curse the earth and anger the spirits. So when they captured kings, princes, and nobles, they found creative ways around that rule. One of the most common methods was trampling. The captured noble would be wrapped in a heavy carpet or rug, placed on flat ground, and then teams of horses would be driven over them again and again until every bone in their body was crushed. When the Mongols defeated the last Abbasid caliph, al-Mustazim, in Baghdad in 1258, they rolled him up in a carpet and had cavalry horses trample him to death. No blood touched the ground. The rule was technically followed. The caliph was still very much dead. The Mongols saw this as a sign of respect, believe it or not. By not spilling noble blood, they believed the spirit could still enter the afterlife. But if they wanted to deny someone the afterlife entirely, they had other methods for that, which we will get to very soon. Here comes number 11, the felt wrap and river throw. Another bloodless execution method that was somehow worse than it sounds. The victim's mouth, nose, and every other opening in their body was sewn shut. Then they were wrapped tightly in felt and thrown into a river. The felt was meant to keep all bodily fluids contained, so nothing polluted the water. When Guyuk Khan suspected a powerful courtier named Fatima of poisoning his brother, this is exactly what they did to her. After days of interrogation and burning, they sewed her up, wrapped her in felt, and tossed her into the river while she was still alive. Let's move to number 10, human shields.
During sieges, the Mongols regularly forced captured civilians from previously conquered towns to march in front of their own soldiers. These prisoners were pushed toward the walls first, absorbing arrows, boiling oil, and rocks meant for the Mongol army. The defenders on the walls often had to choose between killing their own people or letting the Mongols advance.
It was a nightmare either way. During the invasion of Khwarezmia, the Mongols gathered tens of thousands of prisoners and drove them ahead as living shields at every major city. The psychological toll on the defenders was enormous. Many simply gave up and opened the gates. Here comes number 9, backbreaking. When the Mongols wanted to send a personal message, they got personal. The spine snap was reserved for one-on-one situations. There is a famous account in the secret history of the Mongols about a wrestler named Buri, who had once embarrassed Genghis Khan's brother Belgute in a match years earlier. After Genghis rose to power, he invited Buri to a rematch. Buri was terrified, so he let Belgute win on purpose. But Genghis gave the signal, and Belgute pressed his knee into Buri's back and yanked upward on his collarbone, snapping his spine. Buri was dragged outside, paralyzed, and left to die. The lesson was simple: you do not embarrass the Khan's family. Let's move to number 8, catapulting the living and the dead. The Mongols used massive siege engines called mangonels and trebuchets, and they did not always load them with rocks. Sometimes they loaded them with the bodies of plague victims and launched them over city walls to spread disease. This may have been one of the earliest forms of biological warfare in recorded history, but it got worse. Other accounts from European campaigns describe Mongol allied forces loading living prisoners, including children, into catapults and firing them at fortified walls. During conflicts in Italy, defenders on the walls of Cremona watched in horror as living captives were launched through the air toward them. Next one is number 7, skinning alive. Reports from the Mongol invasion of Russia describe soldiers skinning captives alive as punishment for resistance. The process was exactly as horrific as you imagine. The victim was restrained and held down, and the skin was carefully peeled from their body while they remained fully conscious. Some accounts say that particularly skilled executioners could remove large sections of skin in one piece. The pain was beyond anything most people can comprehend. Victims went into shock, but the executioners knew how to keep them alive through the process, prolonging the suffering as long as possible. The purpose was not just punishment. It was a warning that traveled faster than any army. A skinned body left in the open, displayed at a crossroads or hung from city gates, was a message that could be understood in any language. No translation needed. Let's move to number 6, the Feast of the Conquered. This is one of the most disturbing execution methods in all of recorded history. After the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223, the Mongols captured several Russian princes and their commanders who had surrendered expecting mercy. That mercy never came. The prisoners were laid flat on the ground, side by side. The Mongol victors then placed heavy wooden boards on top of them, creating a makeshift platform. And then, the Mongol generals sat down on those boards and held their victory feast. They ate meat, drank fermented mare's milk, and celebrated their win while the princes beneath them were slowly crushed and suffocated to death. The screaming, the cracking of bones, and the sounds of dying men became the background noise for a dinner party. Historical sources say the feast lasted for hours. The Mongols took their time. It was designed to be the ultimate act of dominance, a statement that the conquered were literally beneath them, not even worth a proper execution. Here comes number 5, molten silver execution. In 1219, a Khwarezmian governor named Inauchuk made a terrible mistake. He arrested and executed an entire Mongol trade caravan of about 450 merchants, accusing them of being spies. He seized all their goods and sold them in the markets of Bukhara. When Genghis Khan sent 3 ambassadors to demand justice, the Shah responded by killing the Muslim ambassador and shaving the beards of the 2 Mongol envoys.
which was the ultimate insult in Mongol culture. That was the moment Genghis Khan decided to destroy the entire Khwarezmian Empire. He brought an army of over 100,000 soldiers west. After a 5-month siege, Otrar fell, and Inalchuk was captured alive, exactly as Genghis had ordered. His execution was designed to match his crime. Since Inalchuk had killed the merchants out of greed, the Mongols poured molten silver into his eyes and ears.
Next one, number 4. Mass drowning and river diversion. After the fall of Baghdad in 1258, Hulagu Khan's forces killed so many people that multiple accounts describe the Tigris River running red with blood and then black with ink from the thousands of books thrown into the water. The Grand Library of Baghdad, which held centuries of scientific, medical, and literary knowledge, was destroyed in days. But the Mongols also used rivers as weapons in a completely different way. They diverted entire waterways to flood cities,